there's our thermometer. Like I said, it's very rudimentary. There's our email and our website. Feel free to screenshot that so you have it for future reference. And without any further ado, we're going to jump on what today's topic is. So listen, I got introduced to you, Ralston, about 2 or 3 months ago. I reached out to him as I wanted to get some advice on some philanthropy and giving and nonprofits, and looking at his history, as you'll hear about here soon. You'll understand that I felt like he was probably one that was going to be able to give me some valuable information and insight as to a path forward. So I thought it was a great idea to bring him on board. He recommended it, right, to really just come on and talk about strategies for charitable giving. And so here he is today to give us some advice, give us some wisdom, and mostly give us some opportunities to think about this for ourselves. Give it up for you, Ralston, everyone.
Good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here, and appreciate the chance to share some things that I've been thinking about for a while. So let me share the screen here, and we'll get started. So our agenda today really is to think about giving, to think about why you give, and to think about how that relates to your legacy, what you want your legacy to be. So as the schedule unfolds in the next hour, we'll have 2 breakout groups. And I want to highlight this because I want you to think a little bit about it as you get into your conversations. The first is, why do you give? And the second is to think a little bit more details about what your legacy is. So let me just start briefly with some information about me. I promise I won't violate PowerPoint 101 and read everything on the screen, because I feel comfortable you all can read. My professional background is as a banker, nonprofit CEO. I've been a board member for a number of years. I like to think of myself as an evangelist for philanthropy, and I've been doing some nonprofit consulting. I'm also a choral singer, art collector, gardener, photographer, and I do a couple radio shows for Reading for the Blind, as both here in Cincinnati, where I'm based, and through the Los Angeles Radio Reading Service. This is my professional career. I've a 3-generation farm family based in Southern California. A couple years ago, we sold the ranch. I went to college and graduate school in Massachusetts, worked for a while in New York and Los Angeles, ran a couple of community foundations in California, and moved to Cincinnati just over 3 years ago. Over the last 30 years, I've spent a lot of time sitting on boards, sitting in committee meetings, chairing various kinds of boards. So I've developed some both specific gray hair and some thoughts and ideas about how organizations work from the board perspective, how they can help set strategy, how they can support the CEO and senior staff. There's a wide array of organizations that I've been involved with. I started first when I was in the private banking business as a vehicle to meet clients, and then actually the experiences of being on these boards shaped my career as I left the banking business and went into the philanthropy business full time. If there are some themes here, they're really about organizations that expand opportunities, that think about the arts and effective philanthropy. And all of them are really focused around making the communities they serve better, which I think is partially why it's so much fun to be working with these nonprofits. So when I ran a community foundation, I would often talk to people, and they would come in and they would think about their philanthropy, they would think about their charity, and I would say, well, what do you really want to do? Right? Do you want to support a program at an organization? Do you want to seed an organization itself? Or do you want to launch a movement? And that was really designed to focus their attention as to what they wanted to do with their charitable dollars. And that I think is where you really want to start. I think there's a difference between philanthropy and charity. So philanthropy gives you the power to choose. Charity is often the power to respond to a set of circumstances. What philanthropy can do is allow you to say, no, I'm focused on these particular issues. I'm focused on these causes. I'm focused on these organizations. And one of the most scary comments I ever heard was from a woman who said, you know, I support 2 organizations and everybody else gets $25. She knew exactly what she wanted to do. And so when I said, well, how do you become one of the 2? She said, oh, that decision was made a long time ago. Organizations often think about what role they are in the lives of their donors. And I had somebody say to me, look, you need to keep things in perspective, right? I've got 5 things that I focus on before I even get to you. My family, my church, my school, my community, my children's charities, my children's future. And then you're next, and I love you, right? So it was a really important moment. We're going to talk a little bit later about what kind of giving you want to do, what are the things that you want to see. And I was really moved when I heard from a fellow who had been a consultant for about 30 years. He said, you know, when I go down to Los Angeles and I've got some time, I'll pull off the freeway in the San Fernando Valley, and about 10 minutes off the freeway, I'll put my car on the side of the road and I'll look at this clinic that I help raise money for. And I watch the mostly women who walk in and out of this clinic, sometimes with kids, sometimes without. And I realized that clinic wouldn't be there if it hadn't been for the work that we'd done in raising the money. And he said, I feel good about that. Then I start the car up and go off to my meeting. So linking what you want to do, what you want to achieve is, I think, an important component when you think about your strategies. So many of you probably have been to some of the same seminars that I have. And there's a lot of thought and effort that goes into the question about why people give. And here are some of the reasons. Many of them apply to each and every one of you. Some of them, there are clearly multiple reasons. We give to give back. We give to support things that we believe in and organizations. We give to reflect our values or to cement our values or extend our values. Sometimes we have a history and tradition of those activities in our own families or in our own communities. There are people that give to be prominent in the community, to provide visibility. There are people that want to right a wrong and they want to redress the past. I think one of the most important lessons that nonprofits have to remember is that people give because somebody asks them. One of the things that I believe in is the amount of money that never gets raised because people don't ask is astounding. So understanding why people give is an important part of the fundraising piece, but it's an important part in your own sense of why people give and what they want to do. So let's jump into our first breakout group. And a couple of questions just to share each other. What organizations you believe in? What are causes you think important? What are organizations that you want to fund, that you do fund right now? And why is that important to you? So let's take about 5 minutes and pick around some ideas and think about, try to find some clarity or maybe themes in what you do in terms of your charitable giving.
We're back.
So does anyone want to share any thoughts or insights that came to them from the breakout room?
We had a pretty good variety of stuff. We had things from food pantries to animal causes to the arts. We had a pretty good mix of things between the 3 of us.
Okay. Anyone else? Any thoughts about what motivated the gifts?
Shane, you want to share what you share with us, please?
So I actually founded my nonprofit, Reboot VA. I help veterans build businesses of their own because I was injured. I was medically retired, and all of the support services were to teach me to be employed. But with PTSD, I was not employable. I couldn't go work for someone else. So I established my nonprofit to fill that gap, to help veterans build businesses of their own, because there aren't a lot of support services. There aren't a lot of nonprofits that do that. It's mostly employment or filing paperwork with the VA, which is not what I do.
Terrific.
Mm.
Terrific. One more, any other thoughts or perspectives to share?
I shared, I mean, early on, obviously, I lost my best friend to leukemia 2 years after I joined the Navy. So, once a year for federal employees, combined federal campaign came around for financial contributions and stuff. And so for a long time, I gave to Leukemia Foundation through combined federal campaign until 2006, when I lost my dad to ALS. And then I was like, okay, now I got to split my contribution or double my contribution and just send it to two places, right? And in either case, I think it was a loss of those loved ones that motivated me and prompted me to do so, right?
Right. And I think that was a theme our group had, which was we often give to things that mean something to us. We often give to organizations where we're involved and we know what's going on. And sometimes those gifts start small and sometimes they build, over time. So terrific. Let me jump back into sharing the screen and we'll keep going with my deathless prose here. All right. So if we look at the world of giving, right, there's in my professional years, there's been a huge evolution in the types of organizations and the ways that you can give money. And I'll focus on a couple of these. For a long time, traditional giving was through the United Way, through your church, your school, local symphony, the local museum. And all of those organizations are actually starting to grapple with the fact that they aren't the only game in town anymore. Tithing is going away, great problems for churches. United Way is being challenged because they are no longer, for many organizations, the major funding source. Those organizations have done a good job of getting donors to give them money directly and give them money to support programs and endowments and plan gifts. And so the United Way has had to evolve its giving and the rationale for giving. It used to be a very effective vehicle for gathering lots of small gifts and making a significant contribution. The internet's changed that. There are lots of places that people give small amounts of money. And one of my favorite organizations is listed here called kiva.org, where if you donate $50, you can help a woman in Uganda buy a cow, which you might not think is a whole lot, but for that woman in Uganda, it is a life-changing experience. It gives her resources, it gives her income, it gives a possibility of transforming her family and her economic circumstances. And there's a lot of people that say if you want to attack global poverty, what you do it is you invest in poor women around the world. And when I was in the community foundation business, I used to say, so what is my $50 going to buy me in Oxnard, California, as opposed to Uganda? And you have multiple generations that are thinking about different kinds of ways to make a difference. There's a lot of people that are combining small amounts of money that are going to focus on international aid projects and funding all kinds of different things. Wealthy folks have a lot more tools than they used to have. Donor advised funds, either at national investment firms or community foundations. I believe that 3 of the largest charities in the United States are at Fidelity, Vanguard, and whatever the third firm is. And those are vehicles that allow people to direct funds that they've set aside for which they've already gotten a charitable donation and invested in lots of ways, sometimes privately, sometimes very, very publicly. I've always been a big fan of investing in student scholarships and in providing skills training. There's a, I heard something yesterday on NPR that said students are going to schools for apprenticeships and job training as opposed to going to college up to by 16% this last year, in part because of the enormous cost of going to colleges. So as a donor, right, and you're looking outside those core organizations that you support, there are lots of ways that your charitable dollars can make a difference. So one of the questions here is, how do I actually make that difference? So this photograph was taken at the end of a board retreat where we were asked to write down why we were members of the board of the organization. And then these photographs became the board photographs on the welcoming wall for the organization. At that time, I was president of a community foundation. And one of the reasons that I felt was very important was that I thought we could, in fact, change the future. You invest in students and give them the capacity to get skills, to get jobs. That is a transformative act for themselves, for their families, for their communities. And I think that philanthropy can, in fact, be a way to change the future. One of the questions that I think is worth thinking about is, so how can I, as an individual, support the values that I care about? Is it through serving on an organization? Is it through a financial contribution? Is it through active engagement? One of our group this morning was talking about working at the Restore at Habitat for Humanity, right? There are ways that we spend time doing things that help that organization move forward. I am currently running an organization that couldn't exist if it weren't for volunteers who help serve food, who help pick up food, who help organize our food pantry. So there's one of the ways to think about what we feel is important and what we do is, what are the ways that I can actually do that? So Shane just proved that my first comment is actually incorrect, although I will stand by it, because a lot of people would come in and say, oh, I want to start a nonprofit. And my response often is, don't start it until you know what you're doing. And Shane actually hit it on the head, because he said his organization did things other people didn't. But what we find is a lot of organizations tend to duplicate what other people are doing. And there are advantages to serving on a board, serving on a committee. A lot of what these agencies do are challenging. They're difficult to execute. They require working with partners, and there are ways to learn about doing that. And then you may get to Shane's point, which is this is all very nice, but it isn't going to solve the problem that I think needs to be solved. I think in addition, there are ways to recognize the important power of money, because money makes a lot of things happen, but it's not really always the most important part, right? There are people who are actually doing things with the money that you give that creates the change that's necessary. And I think the other interesting challenge we're looking at as a community and actually as a country is this issue of public-private partnerships to fund what some used to expect from the public purse that's not coming anymore. For a number of years when I was in California, it was pretty clear the state was essentially subcontracting a lot of its work to nonprofits and let the nonprofits do the work. And then when the state ran into financial difficulties, it stopped paying its bills. And so you had CEOs for nonprofits that were taking out loans to make payroll. Understanding that framework in which these organizations work is really important. Many of you have heard the story about the babies in the river, right? So there's a group of people that are on the side of the river and they see all these babies that are flowing down the river. And so some people jumped into the water to try and save the babies. A couple people decided not to follow them and they wanted to walk upstream. And some of their colleagues turned to them and said, well, why don't you help us save the babies? They said, well, we want to find out who's throwing the babies in the river first, right? What's actually creating these issues? And so a lot of the issues that we see that we think need attention are ones that have an impact of public policy and public dollars. I've sat in meeting after meeting in which people say, well, we want to do this, but the amount of public dollars are enormous. And one of the reasons that elections have consequences is the party in power gets to control the distribution of public monies. So there is an increasing number of people that are saying, I want to not just think about helping people in need. I want to think about how we change the system so that there will be less people in need in the future. And so we find people investing in systems change. We find a lot of big philanthropies that are deliberately trying to set up alternatives to public priorities from one political party or the other. And there are folks that are focusing on what are the triple bottom line, both the bottom line for the business, the bottom line for the community, and the bottom line for the larger environment. So as you think about ways to give, this is a increasingly interesting and rich way to explore. Now, there are lots of ways to give, right? Sometimes we think about just simply giving a check. Nonprofits like unrestricted operating money because they help fill up the budget. You can give annual gifts. You can give a capital gift for a project. I spent a lot of time working on endowments, and I think endowments are very important for organizations. They are essentially an anchor to windward. Endowments allow organizations to transition. They anchor the annual budget. They provide a capacity for people to make investments in the long term. You can give non-traditional assets. I first started getting involved in the community foundation world when somebody shared that someone had left the community foundation in Oakland 2 very expensive marble statues that were in their home in Spain. They weren't quite sure what to do with them. The Queen of Spain then decided that she liked the statues and that they really should be remaining in Spain and not sent to the United States. And so the Community Foundation ultimately were able to find a donor who bought them, gave them to the museum in Spain, and sent the money to the Community Foundation in California. So there are lots of ways of thinking about that. Artwork there are lots of issues. Increasingly, for those that have been successful in building up their retirement accounts and they have distribution requirements at a certain age, giving money from their IRA into charities is an incredibly valuable gift. You can't give it to a donor advised fund yet, but you can give it directly to an asset. And then gifts of land, stock, business assets. Charities are getting smarter about that. If you want to get rid of that gas station on the corner in downtown Fresno, you probably aren't going to find too many people who are going to be interested in accepting it, given the environmental liabilities. But there are significant amounts of gifts that make a lot of sense. I think giving is here's some lessons that have been learned over the years in terms of how to give. Advisors are important. Tax laws matter, but you shouldn't let the tax tail wag the dog. No doesn't always mean no. And I think timing is an important issue. Donors give when they're ready to give, not when you necessarily are interested in getting the funds. So, and legacies, I think, are very powerful motivators. There's a number of things to think about here in terms of how and where you want to give. Are you confident the organization is going to be around for a long time when you give them an endowment asset? Do they know what they're doing? Is there someone else who can look after your gift? That's one of the great virtues of a community foundation, because they'll be around for a long time and they'll make sure that your gift goes to support the cause that you care about. Even if the organization you believe in closes down, they will make sure that the money goes to support what you're doing. So there's some things to think about. Talk to your advisors, look at options in terms of ways to maximize your gift and minimize your your liabilities. So let's go to our second breakout group, which is to think a little bit about what your legacy could be. Is there a way that your charitable giving or your philanthropic investments can leverage your legacy, burnish your legacy, make it real? What can I do now that matters to me and to others that will live beyond me? There are some people who don't particularly care about that. I had a client who once said, look, I want to bounce the last check when my wife and I go down on my plane, which was an interesting view of the world. And others have a different approach. So let's spend about 5 or 7 minutes thinking about what are the things that you care about that could shape your long-term giving. All right, so we're in the final stretch here. Any thoughts or ideas to share that struck you in your breakout group?
I think the biggest thing is I don't think anybody had a hard time going, what do I want this to look like? I think for the most part, all of us in our room was able to, in a minute or so, to say, hey, this is what I'm really focused on doing, and this is what I want it to look like, right? Which is awesome.
So I think one of the things we focused on, which was always important to go back to the, the big five, the first 5 issues, is how can I feel good about what my kids are doing or what my grandchildren are doing, and how can we find ways to help them? I think I saw a couple of days ago, there's a staggering percentage of folks that are helping their kids financially. And there's an awful lot of grandparents that are paying for expenses for their grandchildren, whether they're going to school or they're going to camp or all sorts of things. So it's there's a very real sense, grounded, I think, in reality, that our children and our grandchildren are facing different hurdles than we did when we were younger. And whether that's helping them buy a house or helping them pay for insurance or helping them do other things, it's not just taking them to Europe for a week. It's helping to fund basic things. And you marry that with, well, we're probably going to live longer than our parents did chronologically. And we want to make sure there's enough money there to look after us. So any other thoughts to share from the breakout room?
We're talking about responding to people coming to you in the street, and how sometimes just giving a couple of bucks or a sandwich, like, one is just an act of humanity.
Right.
It's more, it's beyond the money, right? It's just you see that person and they feel that you care.
And I think that's one of the powerful things that I really like about the work that we're doing at Queen City Kitchen, which is it's pretty straightforward. People come and they get food because they need food. And that's, there are a lot of other issues, and there's a lot of really terrific organizations which help them navigate a lot of issues. But we decided we're going to focus on providing food. And when they walk away, they either have a bag of groceries from the pantry or they have a hot meal in their stomach. And sometimes that's really, really important for them. It seems not necessarily transformational, but it is important. All right, let's continue here with the presentation. So I want to spend just a little bit on the power of legacies. People talked about it in our breakout sessions. What do they mean to you? What do they mean to others? There's just a couple of things that I think are important to think about. So what's the right time frame, right? So the cliche has always been rags to riches to rags in 3 generations. So huge amounts of money doesn't always improve things. And I found in some of my private banking conversations that parents are very concerned about how much is too much. What I've also seen is grandparents and grandkids working in tandem, sometimes through family foundations or family funds, everybody getting together and the morning after Thanksgiving deciding how much money to give collectively. and it's a great way to teach and transmit values through serving and investing, or sometimes, as we've seen, families coming together and serving in the kitchen. Open communication is something that is hugely important in my view. Troubled families create troubled legacies, right? What often you don't want to do is have your children or grandchildren go to the organization you endowed and spend the time walking around singing "This Nearly Was Mine." Making sure your children and your grandchildren understand what you're doing and understand why. Leaving messages that cause further pain is something people sometimes do. And issues about control over the gift, right? There are people that decide that they're going to control what's happened to their children and what the kind of things they do and put restrictions on the gift. Sometimes makes sense. Sometimes it allows people to reach out from the grave and continue to play a controlling role. And I think there's also, I come from a family of 5 children. How do you balance equity and fairness over different skills and abilities and temperaments? And if you don't get chosen to be the executor, are you going to throw a snit fit? Are you going to create problems? Is that going to create lasting divisions? We in my family, we had a multi-generational family business, and the 4 of us were tasked with running a business with 4 equal partners. I'm not sure I would ever recommend that to everybody, but that was what my mother wanted, and it lasted for 8 years. And not everybody is talking to one another, so it does create problems. The other thing to think through in terms of legacies is, what do we remember and how do we remember, right? And what is important about a legacy? I had a brother who died in his early 40s. And I took this picture yesterday because it's a dogwood tree that was planted in my sister's house, given by her friends when he died. And that was 20 years ago. So when we see things like this, they bring back memories, and as a way to honor and remember somebody. In my own family, we had a tradition that started in 1945 when my grandmother began decorating the church in honor and memory of her son, who was killed the year before in 1944 in the South Pacific. And for many years, it was what we would call a silent memorial, because she never said anything about it. And then it sort of became clear that that was why she did it. She provided these 6-foot-tall poinsettia plants that were grown on the ranch at Christmas time and decorated flowers at Easter time. Well, after 70 years, there was nobody left that remembered Lieutenant James Lawrence Fowler, whose name I carry as my middle name. And we decided to commission a mosaic from a local artist that commemorated this tradition at our church. The mosaic is there on the bottom, Easter flowers on the left, Christmas flowers on the right, and the central panel has a bunch of California native flowers because my mother worked at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden. And if you see there in the left corner, there's a plane which commemorates Lieutenant James Lawrence Fowler, who was killed in the South Pacific. So this was something, and across the top, there is that last phrase in the Gospel of Matthew, "Lo, I am with you always." Something that was very important to me and to my sister as a way to honor and acknowledge my mother, and a longstanding family tradition that created some value. And sometimes I think we invest in others and in a future. For my mother's 80th birthday, we established a scholarship in her name at her college, Scripps College. And when she died, she endowed that fund that now provides half tuition scholarship for 2 students. She was honored by her alma mater with the Ellen Browning Scripps Society Award. But it was a gift that she felt very important to provide opportunities She acknowledged that the world she saw at Scripps College in 1937 doesn't look like the one today. But it's providing an opportunity for women to get an education and to equip them to succeed in the world that they are facing. John Woodruff Simpson graduated in 1872 from my alma mater, and 50 years later, his partners at Simpson Thacher in New York established a scholarship fund. And 50 years after that, I benefited from that when I went to graduate school. So that legacy continued forward. And when our family business was sold, I established a fund at the Community Foundation in honor of my late brother that supports organizations who deal with mental illness because he was a schizophrenic. And we have a heritage fund there that honored the heritage of the Valley. And my grandparents were active in Ventura County, and he was a lemon grower there for many, many years. And it was a way for me to honor them and to honor the seminal role they played in our family. So just a couple of examples. I know we're getting close to the end of time. So just some questions to think about, and hopefully this has stimulated some thought for you. What is in your legacy? For many of us, it's our families and our children, grandchildren. How can you honor those you love and those who made a difference? How can you give back to what you want to that which means the most to you? So here's my contact information. I'm happy to follow up with you at your convenience, answer any questions, and happy to open the floor for a couple minutes at least for any questions or comments.
Any questions? Go ahead, Jeff.
I put it in the chat, but because I didn't see it mentioned in the list of ways to assist. You didn't mention attending fundraising events.
Yes.
So
and I think that's one way to give resources and to provide visibility for the organization. When I joined the Art Museum board, I was told that we had to buy a table at the annual event. And that was one way to bring people into the organization and to share with them why the organization was important and why you were a board member. But yes, you're spot on. Any other thoughts, comments? On the right track? Go back to farming?
Marite's raising her hand.
Great. Go ahead, Marite.
Questions?
I think she might have been waving by.
Oh, that might have been
Oh.
maybe.
She might have been waving by. Anybody else? Awesome. Hey,
think,
give it up for. Go ahead, Fred. Go ahead.
I appreciate Hugh's presentation today. Many of us on the screen here are at a point in life, and a lot of these things that he talked about are kind of hitting us between the eyes. So appreciate it. It was very interesting and good responses from a lot of people.
All right. Thanks again. I appreciate your courtesy of listening. And there's a lot of good work that we're all doing individually and collectively, and it makes a huge difference in the kind of communities we live in. So bravo. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for your time today. Real quick, Deb Hart, if you can take a minute and just introduce yourself, tell us who you are, what you do, and hopefully why you came here.
Sure thing. So just a couple of weeks ago, I met my friend Greg Butler. He's also a part of another job seekers organization that I'm a part of. And he mentioned Coffee Connect and how uplifting this group is. And so that's why I'm here. And I have to share that Coffee Connect is a huge morale booster. Thank you so much. Sorry for not being on camera. I just not feeling so well. So it's a kind of a down day for me, but I am an IT project manager. I'm in transition to a new role. So I'm actively looking. I have 20 years of experience and just am totally excited to get back into the workforce here.
Awesome. And Deb, where are you out of?
Cleveland, Ohio.
Todd Packer jumped out of here too. I think he had another meeting to jump on in the middle of it all. But guys, next week we're talking about inclusive but not intrusive leadership. Okay. I want to hear all your ideas next week on, what are some of the boundaries you feel have been pushed maybe throughout your time, either being led or leading others, right? And really figure out how we can better pull our teams into the conversations that we're having when it comes down to change. Because the following week after that, we're going to talk about change management and what it means to have a healthy conflict. So listen, great job again. You really appreciate your time and all the advice you've given me over the last few months here, and joining our group really and taking part in our little family we've got here. Go out there, have a great week, everybody. Make a difference, smile on someone. Brenda, keep that smile going, all right? And make sure someone knows that when you walk by them that you love them, okay? Love you guys.
Love you guys too. Take care. Have a great week.
If you would